What is the problem? What is the problem? What is the problem when you love them women and they don't love you?
Hello, it's Jim, Vinyl Designs. I'm going to do a vinyl finds. I realized the other day that I could probably do my entire collection as vinyl finds because I've really bought everything in the last 6 months or so. You know it's a problem when you go into the record store for this and you come out with this. So we're going to go through these pretty quickly. So I went into the record store for this record, which is Everything But the Girl Amplified Heart. This record had never been released on vinyl. It had only come out on CD. And they put this out, it's been 25 years, so it came out in 94. Kind of a rebirth for the band. A bit of a change in musical direction. It's a little bit more polished. It's actually a little bit more relaxed, not quite as uptight as a few of the previous releases. Ben Watt, one half of the band, had been very sick, basically almost died. And this was kind of the record that happened after they realized that he was actually going to live. So I think they had a pretty different perspective and seemed to have shaken them up in a way that I think had a great effect on them. Tracy Thorn's vocals, as always, were beautiful. It's really a classic record. Definitely worth going out and picking that up on vinyl if you are at all interested in Everything But the Girl. Another re-release, Gomez. This is their second record. And this, I think, I don't think it's been re-released since the original. Maybe it has, maybe it's been repressed, but they just repressed this as a 20-year repress. This is Liquid Skin. It's kind of cool packaging, but I really don't like these pocket sleeves. They're kind of a pain to deal with, but the packaging itself is pretty nice. I did not have this record on vinyl. I only had it on CD originally, so it's nice to get this on vinyl. I'm a pretty big fan of Gomez, really kind of sort of blues revival. I don't know how else to describe them, but they made a series of really great records in the very end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s. Next is Ringo Deathstar, Pure Mood. This came out in, I think, 2015, maybe? Check the date on this. 2015, yep. Ringo Deathstar is a nice, I guess, second wave shoegaze band. I did not get this on the fancy colored vinyl, though, as Sam over at Vinyl Douche would say, this is on polished licorice. I love their sound, though. They not entirely original, but not every band has to be original to be great. Look at the Rolling Stones. But really good sound, especially if you like shoegaze. And then I started looking at the recent used bins, and that was a mistake. So I'll go through these fairly quickly. But there had been some people who had come in that week and dropped off a lot of really good records. So Waterboys, A Pagan Place, this is their second record. They had EP and then a record and then this. Waterboys were a band that kind of went through two big phases. Early phase in the 80s was kind of a U2 REM kind of sort of sound, really anthemic, great music. And then in the late 80s, they kind of switched up their sound to be much more of a sort of folk, blues, almost Van Morrison derivative, but really nice sound. So I like both phases of the Waterboys. I don't have a preference. I think they were both great, but I have probably a nostalgia for the first phase. I saw them in their first US show when they opened for U2, the War Tour maybe? I can't remember if it was War or Unforgettable Fire. I think it might have been Unforgettable Fire, their first show in the US, where the Waterboys opened for U2. And then I think it was The Alarm who opened for the War Tour. It's been a long time. Next, I found Tennis, Yours Unconditionally, or Yours Conditionally. I really enjoy Tennis. Tennis is kind of a soft, I don't know how you describe them. They're a little dream poppy. They remind me of sort of a bit of Phil Spector girl group kind of tone, but in a lighter way. I think this is the Vinyl Me Please edition, so it's got, some artwork and, but the packaging is really nice and it sounds beautiful. It's a great record. Found a copy of Romeo Void's Benefactor. Loved Romeo Void. Deborah Ayal, great singer, totally unlike anything that was happening in the 80s. This album has Never Say Never, which got some radio play. They also got radio play for a song called Girl in Trouble. But saw them, I don't know, maybe 82, 3, somewhere around there. Just a phenomenal band. There aren't enough saxophones in bands these days, so really, really good band. Found a copy of Kerplunk, Green Day. I think this is a recent repress. Actually, I think this is a 2008 repress. Not sure if this is actually an official repress or not. When I looked it up on Discogs, it seemed to indicate that this might not be, but sounds great, works great. It's I liked Green Day's early records. Their later records, I think, are fine, but they kind of lost their reason for being in my mind. They were a little more interesting early on when they were a little rougher. Couple Heartless Bastards records, Stairs and Elevators, their first. This is a gatefold. And then, hold on a second. Just got a delivery. So Stairs and Elevators, I believe is their first record. And then Restless Ones is much more recent. I think this is the last few years, maybe 2015 or so. This is, I think, just before Arrow, which I talked about on a previous video. Both of these are, this is a classic. Love this. I'm a big fan of Heartless Bastards. I've only gotten to see them once, and it was actually at the I've completely forgotten the name of it. There's a huge folk festival, bluegrass festival, Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. They do that every year in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And they have all kinds of different bands, but and it's free, which is phenomenal. That's a whole nother story. But I saw them play there, and the amp, I've forgotten her name, the singer and guitarist, her amp kept cutting out, and she was such a trooper, such a professional, did not stop the show, just kept trying to deal with it and kept playing, and I thought, you know, that's how you do it. I've seen other people who just give up and, you know, throw a tantrum, or she was great, and it was a good show. So next I found this little gem, Ennio Costa, Music of Middle-earth. So I can't pass up things like this because I grew up, I was thinking about this the other day when I picked this up, realizing that my relationship to Lord of the Rings as a kid, I read it when I was in 6th grade or so, 6th or 7th grade. And so it was just pure imagination because at that time there weren't really movies or I think the Ralph Bakshi animated version had maybe come out, but I hadn't seen it yet. And it was terrible anyways. But everything that was related to Middle-earth or Tolkien that had been kind of produced was absolute garbage. Just terrible stuff. You know, the Hobbit cartoon, the Lord of the Rings movie. They were all really, really awful things. And then there were a lot of things like this. There were records that were like Middle-earth music and things like that. And they were all super cheesy. And that was the way that we kind of grew up. We were all disappointed by everything related to Lord of the Rings except the books. And I realized that millennials have grown up, like my kid has grown up, with a whole different relationship with it because there's, you know, this phenomenal series of movies and video games that are fairly decent quality and all these other things that, you know, just, you know, we had the books and we had to imagine everything. And this, by the way, is terrible. It's basically symphonic music with some classical singing. Some of it is interesting. Most of it is unbearable. Okay, so next, found a copy of Carla Bley. Is it Bley or Bly? Not sure. Most people know her husband more than her, Paul. And this is a live record recorded at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco in the early 80s. I, like a lot of people, this is a statement that a lot of people will say, I would like to know more about jazz and get more into jazz. I struggle with that a lot because there's so much of it, and it's not something that most of us grow up with in popular culture, so we don't have those little touchstones that are sort of, oh, I recognize that, I can connect to that. And so it becomes this whole like, okay, you kind of commit to this journey. And there's such a variance in like, where do I start? You know, I do watch a lot of vinyl community videos where people talk about jazz, and it's a good place to kind of get a sense of some things. But with most of those, people are talking about jazz in a way that they're really talking to other people who already know about jazz. They'll say things like, oh yeah, you know, Morgan's great, so, you know, we don't need to talk about him. Like, I don't fucking know Morgan, so how would I know this? I don't know any of these things. But, you know, that's that's my fault, not theirs. But it does make it a little harder to step in. And I think one of the things that I'd like to do in the vinyl community is start asking people to make sort of 101 videos and ask for certain genres or styles and say, you know, hey, give me 5 great jazz records to start out with. I have Kind of Blue by Miles Davis and Sorcerer, and they're great records. I have a few other jazz records, but I don't really know where to go from there. Anyways, I do enjoy this record. I don't think that this is particularly challenging when it comes to jazz, but it is kind of, I'd say, early 80s, I guess, free jazz. No idea, but I believe that's what she's known for, so I'm going to assume that's what that is. So now we'll go on to something I know what I'm talking about. Portishead. This is Roseland, New York City. This is a live record. This was the only Portishead that I had left to pick up. And it's a beautiful recording, symphonic recording. Beth Gibbons sounds amazing. The fact that Beth Gibbons can sound as great in a live recording as she can in the studio is kind of amazing because she has a unique voice. And I think at the time that I first started listening to Portishead, I just assumed that there was a lot of studio magic going on, but she's just incredible. Phenomenal voice. Found a copy of Baby by Detroit Cobras. Big fan of Detroit Cobras. I heard somebody talking the other day about seeing Detroit Cobras and being really bummed out by the show because Rachel Nagy is a particular kind of personality. That is true. And when you see a show from them, maybe it's not every show, but certainly the show I've seen and what I hear from other people is she tends to just not care about anybody or anything on stage, and she's really got this very strong attitude, kind of a take no guff kind of attitude. I sound like a reporter from the 40s, but she's amazing, and maybe I like that kind of thing. I don't know. She's got such a great voice, and I've always thought that Detroit Cobras were the world's greatest cover band. Most of what they do is covers. Great sound. Next, I picked up a copy of Grinderman. This is Grinderman 2, Nick Cave's sort of stripped down band. It's a certain percentage of the Bad Seeds, but really kind of more raw, more blues oriented. Amazing band. Saw them live at Slim's in San Francisco, so it was just phenomenal to see Nick Cave basically and most of the Bad Seeds in a tiny little club in the city, and just the first I'd say 2/3 of the show was Grinderman. This was on the first album, and then so they didn't have that much material, and then they basically just went into Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds songs, and it was just a phenomenal show. So Grinderman 2 is a great record, kind of picks up where the first Grinderman left off, and great songs. And then I also picked up a copy of the remix version of this, which I have not listened to yet, and I'm curious about it. I haven't heard it, but it's a series of remixes. It's actually a double LP, like Grinderman. I'm sorry, like, oh wait, it was Grinderman? No, this is a single LP. So they actually have The remix is actually a longer pressing. But yeah, you can't go wrong with Grinderman. They've only got 3 records, I think, plus the remix. The next one is a band that I heard about through the VC, and it was long ago enough that I wasn't taking notes on who I heard about the band from. So I'd like to just thank the VC in general, because I can't remember who it was. It may have been Sam, the Vinyl Douche. I'm not sure. May have been Tales from the Crate. I can't remember who I heard about this from. But it's The Books. I didn't know The Books before I started watching vinyl community videos. And this is the Lemon of Pink. They're a great band. The music is kind of folk with a sort of smattering of electronica and kind of the vinyl is nice looking. And I don't know how else to describe them. But just a great sound. Now I'm curious to pick up other records from them, because this record really turned out to be amazing. I think this is a repress on Vinyl Me Please. And the packaging is really cool. It's a gatefold. And then this is a cutout. And there's a book in here. So cutout. And this book is great. It has a lot of sort of background, writing about sort of stories behind things. And then it's got the actual lyrics in here as well. But really nice packaging and beautiful record. Next is I found a copy of Perfume Genius, Too Bright. Perfume Genius is really just beautiful compositions, beautiful voice. If you don't know them yet, think sort of Sam Smith with more interesting compositions in my mind. Not quite the vocal range of someone like Sam Smith, but just a beautiful, beautiful voice. Yeah, would love to see them live as well. Haven't done that yet. Then found a couple other things that took me back to the late 80s, early 90s. Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet. Great record, classic record. Saw Public Enemy in the early 90s. Just an amazing show. It was a little bit after this. I think it was a couple years after this. And then found a copy of Nothing Shocking from Jane's Addiction. The first 2 records from Jane's Addiction, I think, are just amazing. I haven't been able to find the first record. It doesn't seem to be in print. I think it's out of print. Which is surprising to me. I think this is actually a fairly recent pressing. It's on 180 gram. It's nicely packaged. I didn't look up the matrix code, but I can't believe that it wouldn't be a fairly recent pressing. So I saw Jane's Addiction a few times. The first time I saw Jane's Addiction was at a little club in San Francisco, and great show, absolutely amazing show. That was on the first record. I saw them on this tour at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. the 930 Club at that time, it's different now. They moved to a new venue and it's really big now. But at that time, it was a little club. I remember they had like the support beams were like in the middle of the room, so you had to kind of work your way around the beams in order to get a good view. But I believe on that tour, Perry Farrell had broken his leg, and I can't remember which tour it was, if it was this one or the first one, but in one of the shows that I saw him, his leg was in a cast. And he was still amazing on stage. And then I saw him years later on the Porno for Pyros tours. I saw one of those, and that was an interesting show. I never picked up their music. I never connected to that band, but I had a personal connection with somebody who was playing for them, and so we went to the show, and there was this funny thing that happened. It wasn't really funny. It was really messed up, actually. At the end of the show, I guess the tour manager came on at the end of the show. Maybe it was during the encore or something, and said, "Hey, somebody stole our camera gear. So we're not letting anybody out of the show until we figure this out." And this is a nightclub, and they basically locked the doors of the nightclub and were letting people out like one by one. It was probably the most like illegal thing that you could ever do at a nightclub, to lock people in. It was really pretty messed up. I never really got over that. In a way we thought it was funny, but in another way we thought, this is really messed up. I don't think they ever found the camera gear, because my guess is it was somebody that worked there and they just went out the back door with it or something. But anyways, yep. So those are the vinyl finds that I picked up recently in the last week or two. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope that was somewhat interesting, and we'll see you soon.